They said I was tired. They said I was confused. They said I didn't understand money anymore. But what they never expected was that I understood everything. I've lived in Louisiana my entire life. I raised my children on slow mornings, strong coffee, and lessons about honesty. I trusted my family because that's what you do when you've spent your life giving without keeping score. After my husband passed, the house grew quieter but not lonelier. Also, I thought, my son started coming around more often. He said he wanted to check on me. His voice was sweet, almost rehearsed. At first, I was grateful. Then I noticed the questions. How much is left in your savings? Did you already pay this bill? Are you sure you remember where the documents are? I laughed it off. Everyone forgets small things, right? Then small things started disappearing. Cash from envelopes, jewelry I wore every Sunday, papers I'd kept in the same drawer for years. When I asked, they exchanged looks, quick ones like signals. My daughter-in-law would smile and say, "Mama, you probably moved it." Probably. That word followed me everywhere. Probably tired. Probably confused. Probably imagining things. They started talking about doctors, about help, about how hard it must be for me to manage life alone. I noticed how often they said, "We'll handle it," instead of "You decide." That's when I stopped arguing and started observing. I've always believed silence reveals more than words. So I listened. I watched. I wrote things down in a small notebook I kept tucked under a cushion in the lounge. Dates, amounts, conversations. That didn't make sense until later. The more I stayed quiet, the bolder they became. One afternoon, I heard my son on the phone in the hallway. He didn't see me sitting in the lounge. "She doesn't question it anymore," he said. "We just need her signature." My heart didn't race. It settled. Because in that moment, I understood something important. This wasn't concern. This was preparation. They believed time was on their side. They believed age had weakened me. They believed I'd already surrendered. They were wrong. I didn't raise a family by accident. And I didn't survive loss by being careless. I was letting them think they were in control, while I quietly gathered the truth. What I discovered next wasn't just missing money. It was a legal move that could have erased me forever. I didn't confront them right away. Instead, I did something much smarter. I let them believe I was slipping. I asked the same questions twice. I pretended to forget dates I knew by heart. When they corrected me, I smiled and thanked them. Nothing builds false confidence faster than being underestimated. That's how I earned access to places I was never meant to look. One afternoon, while my son and his wife were out, I went into the small office off the hallway. They thought I never went in there anymore. Too many papers, too much clutter, they said. Perfect place to hide something. I opened drawers slowly, carefully, and then I found it. A thin folder, clean, organized, labeled with my full legal name. Inside were copies of my bank statements highlighted, property documents I hadn't touched in years, and then the paper that made my hands go cold. A power of attorney form. Not signed, not notarized, but already filled out. My name typed neatly at the top. Their names listed below. All it needed was one shaky signature. They weren't planning to help me someday. They were preparing to take control soon. That evening, my daughter-in-law sat beside me in the lounge. Her voice was gentle, almost sweet. "We just want to make things easier for you," she said. "You shouldn't have to worry about all this anymore." I asked what all this meant. She glanced toward the hallway. Bills, decisions, stress. Later, my son joined us. He talked about responsibility, about how life was expensive, about how hard it was to care for someone who might not always understand what's happening. Then he said it. "Just sign a few documents. We'll handle the rest." I asked if I could read them later. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "There's really no need," he said. "We already explained everything." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I organized everything I had, my notebook, copies of documents, bank records, and dates that now made perfect sense. Withdrawals lined up with visits. Conversations matched paperwork. It wasn't a mistake, it was a sequence, and sequences mean intent. So I began collecting more than notes. I saved messages. I recorded conversations. I photographed documents they assumed I'd never notice. Every time they spoke about help, they revealed another piece of the plan. They thought I was fading. What they didn't realize was this. I was preparing for the moment they'd pushed too far. The meeting they scheduled to make it official became the moment everything unraveled, and I made sure it was recorded. They called it a family conversation. They chose a quiet afternoon, when the Louisiana heat pressed softly against the windows and the house felt heavy with stillness. The table was already set when I walked in, papers stacked neatly, a pen placed carefully on top, like a final detail in a plan that had been rehearsed. My son sat across from me, his wife beside him, calm, confident. They began slowly, explaining things I had known for years. My age came up more than once. So did my health. They spoke about stress and how hard life had become for them, about how much they worried. Then the document slid toward me. "This just makes things easier," my son said. "You don't have to think about the hard stuff anymore." I picked up the pen. I let my hand shake slightly. Then I asked one simple question. "What happens if I don't sign?" The room changed. My daughter-in-law answered first. "Well, then we'd have to look at other options." "Like what?" I asked. She hesitated. My son didn't. "Doctors," he said. "Evaluations. We just want what's best." They didn't say the word incapable, but they didn't have to. I set the pen down. Instead, I reached into my pocket and placed my phone in the center of the table. The screen lit up. "Could you explain that again?" I asked calmly. "I want to make sure I remember." My son stiffened. "Why are you recording?" "Because I forget things," I said. "That's what you told everyone." Silence filled the room. I asked them to walk me through the documents slowly, to explain what control meant, to clarify what would happen to my house, my money, my choices. They did. And with every explanation, the truth slipped out. They spoke about timelines, about expenses, about what would happen eventually. Their patience faded. Their voices sharpened. Concern turned into frustration. "You're being difficult," my son said finally. "On purpose." I nodded. I always was. When they realized I wasn't signing, they tried pressure, guilt, reminders of everything they'd done for me. I thanked them. When they left, the papers remained untouched on the table. I sat alone, listening to the familiar sounds of my home, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. They thought that meeting would end it. They were wrong. By the next morning, I had made one phone call and it changed everything they thought they controlled. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I made one phone call. The lawyer listened quietly while I explained everything. I shared the documents, the recordings, the dates. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't need to. The truth had already lined itself up. He told me something I'll never forget. "You are not powerless. They're counting on you believing that." By the end of the week, my world was different. My accounts were secured. My will was updated. My home was protected by law, not promises. I changed the locks, not out of anger, but out of necessity. When my son returned, his confidence was gone. He didn't yell this time. He asked questions. He tried to explain. He said things had gone too far. I handed him copies of the legal paperwork and told him future communication would go through my attorney. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was, because the woman sitting in front of him was no longer trying to be understood. She was protecting herself. They accused me of betrayal, of being cruel, of breaking the family apart. I listened until they were finished. Then I said one thing. I trusted you. You used that. After that, I chose peace. I moved into a smaller place nearby, quiet, bright, and entirely mine. I brought my plants, my books, and the notebook that kept me grounded when everyone else told me I was wrong. I still write things down, not because I'm afraid of forgetting, but because memory is power when someone tries to take it from you. People assume strength fades with age. They're wrong. Strength just changes shape. It becomes quieter, sharper, more deliberate. I don't regret protecting myself. And I don't regret telling this story because someone watching right now might be hearing the same soft lies I once heard. And if that's you, remember this. Your voice doesn't disappear just because others stop listening. If this story stayed with you, share it because silence is exactly what they count on.